We're now focusing on the third category of overeating situational types, which is emotional eating that leads to overeating. I think of emotional eating as the big banana. This is the big player in our relationship with food and our food wars. It certainly has a profound effect for many people on eating too much, which is what we're talking about right now, and it also might very well be the thing that's permeating and fueling much of your food war. This behavior of emotional eating is eating as a result of, or in reaction to, emotion. It's very common, it's very pervasive, and it's complex. So whether emotional eating leads to eating too much or not, the goal for anyone I've ever worked with and for myself when dealing with my own food war was to simply end this eating pattern. We don't want to eat because of or in reaction to emotion as an eating behavior that shows up daily or weekly in our eating life. It's not particularly healthy, and more often than not, it does lead to overeating, eating too much. So this is a big topic, and I'm going to give you the foundation on emotional eating here in this lesson and the next one, lesson 6. This topic of emotional eating, whether it leads to overeating or not, feels like the hot button for you, the big issue, the one that needs a lot more attention. Tell me, because then I can give you so much more teaching around it. So first, let's start with the definition. What exactly is emotional eating, and how do you know if you're doing it? I like to break down the definition of what it is and how it shows up in a few parts. First, in its most simple and common form, emotional eating is eating, putting food into your mouth, solely because you're feeling a feeling, which is most often negative, and you don't really want to continue feeling that feeling, so you eat as a way to shift your state of being in that moment to not feel that feeling anymore. This is probably the most common way we think about it, and here's what that looks like. In any moment, your emotional state can shift. This might be where 5 minutes ago you were feeling fairly calm and neutral, and your mind and your body were in a peaceful state while you were doing your thing, but now, 5 minutes later, some thoughts started swirling in your head about maybe a problem in your life. And in an instant, those thoughts have now produced a feeling of, say, deep sadness, maybe even grief. So you feel that sadness, your body is now more lethargic, it's zapped of energy, and maybe even a bit of a paralyzed feeling sets in. And with this, your mind is in a total loop. And ideally, all you want is to get out of there. You want to exit that state of being with all that sadness and heaviness now flowing through your cells. The core reason of why the sadness flowed in the first place is not relevant for our purposes in this moment. The feeling could have come because of many different triggers, both thought-related and energy-related. So guess what would seem really good in that moment to get you out of feeling those sad, heavy, negative feelings? Oh, a donut might do it pretty fast. No, seriously, I'm not being sarcastic. A few cookies, or 5, or 10, would definitely do the trick and shift your emotional state really fast. Why? Well, let's keep using sugar as an example. There's 2 reasons why sugar would get you out of that sad feeling state pretty fast. Pleasure and biology or biological. For pleasure, hey, sugary things taste good. The pleasure of sweet food is very appealing when in that particular moment you're feeling emotional pain. We as humans are biologically programmed to avoid pain, i.e. feeling the negative feeling, and to seek pleasure, i.e. the sweet taste of the donut or the cookie. So biologically, it certainly makes sense that we would turn to sugar to shift our emotional state pretty darn fast. It works. In addition, sugar physically changes our chemistry, our biological state, which is what we want in the moment. If you're feeling sad, there's something very specific happening with your neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin that's different than when you were feeling calm and decently happy 5 minutes ago. Guess what very swiftly, chemically shifts those neurotransmitters again? Sugar. It's a drug, and it works fast. So after about 10 minutes of eating sugar, we feel happier, we feel lighter, we feel less sad. So it makes total sense why somebody would emotionally eat with sugar. Now, let's use another example of what can happen with emotional eating for this first definition or first scenario of it. Fatty foods make sense too for what you might be drawn to if you're eating emotionally. Let's use the emotions of worry and anxiety for this example. 1 minute, you're calmly going about your day, and in the next, you just dug into some worrisome thoughts about something that may or may not happen tomorrow. And within minutes, you now feel wrought with worry and anxiety. These are different emotions than sadness in that first example. With this worry and anxiety, your mind is racing and your body gets heightened and even maybe a bit excitable. In addition, it might start to feel tight and restricted or constricted at the same time. Now notice, by the way, that what I just described for feeling anxiety and worry is a different set of body reactions than what I described for the bodily experience of sadness. This will be relevant later. So guess what kind of foods might help get you out of this anxiety, worry state the fastest? Yep, those good old fatty things. Any kind of fat. Nuts, oils, butter, fried chicken, cheese, creamy pasta, or perhaps that heavy cake full of fat and sugar. Fat is heavy, it's grounding, it gives us a sense of security, which is exactly what we're not feeling and so much when we're wanting when anxiety or nervousness is coursing through our cells. So these are just a few examples for the first definition of emotional eating, which is eating solely because you're feeling a feeling that you'd rather not feel, so you eat as a way to shift your state of being in that moment and not feel that feeling anymore. The second definition that we're going to work with now for this explanation of emotional eating is that emotional eating can also be eating as a result of not wanting to feel a feeling. And what I mean by this is that it could be possible that you're not actually feeling a strong emotion yet, but for whatever reason, you're in fear that it's coming. I figured out that this is what I did very regularly when I was emotionally eating, like every day or every few days. Something like a repeated thought or an interaction with another or a situation that would come up that day would trigger me to remember a feeling I didn't particularly like that I had felt often, like despair. And in an instant, the thought would set in of, oh, well, I don't want to feel that again. And immediately the fear of feeling the feeling creeping in again would take over. So when the fear set in, my programming and body response then went to what I had done before to get out of that feeling, which was eat. It's kind of like that Pavlov dog response thing again, because truly this fear process that I just described is not a highly conscious process. You're doubtfully aware of all that's happening, but your awareness will kick in when you start eating and then realize that you weren't really hungry in the first place, so why really are you eating right now? Another angle to present this idea that you might resonate with is that emotional eating feels like a distraction. It can. So in the first definition, our scenario of emotional eating I gave, it's a drive to eat to physically change your state, to feel relief, to see a shift. And with this one, it might feel a bit more like you really just want a distraction from where you're at. So you distract yourself with eating, and that could be eating anything, and especially eating something pleasurable. You want a diversion. You may want comfort. And it's very easy when you're in this place to eat too much. For some people, it's really not about the actual food or the pleasure of the food. It's about the quantity immediately. And that, of course, is where it's relevant here to overeating. Feeling stuffed is a distraction in itself. And finally, for our third definition of emotional eating, it can simply be in response to an emotion, usually positive, without necessarily the drive to change your state, as I described in the first scenario. What I mean by this is that sometimes we eat in response to feeling very positive emotions, like happy and excited. We don't discriminate here when it comes to emotional eating. We are an equal opportunity employer as humans. So we might feel on fire, we feel invigorated, something good just happened. And then we find ourselves eating solely in response to those positive emotions. We may not be particularly hungry at the time, but we want to go eat in response to the feeling. So this is slightly different than the first two scenarios because with this one, you wouldn't be eating to feel better and get out of being in an uncomfortable situation or state. You would be eating in response to the usually positive emotional state you're in. I think the argument can be made that this is not necessarily a bad thing in theory, but the issue comes again when this is an eating pattern. When eating in response to emotion, positive or negative, happens as a consistent behavioral daily or weekly pattern, and then as a result, you're eventually either overeating because of it, or you're eating too many things too often that aren't the healthy choices you want to be making. Both of these situations could be problematic for your weight and your health, and therefore fueling your food war. If your goal is to finally get the weight, body, and food relationship you want, join me in the End Your Food War Premier course. I'll take you through a comprehensive 5-step program that will forever get you out of food jail and into the peace with the thing that you have to do every day: eat. EndYourFoodWar.com for all details and enrollment.